do a countdown for these things? Hey, all right. And then
We're
Knicks
live.
fans, it's your boy Jonathan Macri with you, cracking open a little what's tonight? Wednesday evening cocktail. I'm here with the great DJ Zullo. Hello, DJ.
What's up, my man? I feel like we've talked now a couple times over the past week and a half or so. Things are good on my end. How have you been? Everything all right?
I'm good. As I was just telling you, we are the Macri family is leaving for Las Vegas tomorrow morning, and very excited about that. Very excited to tap in at Summer League. It'll be my first Summer League foray since Zion Williamson snatched Kevin Knox's soul. But now Kevin Knox is back.
Yes,
to reclaim his soul.
Yes,
with the Golden State Warriors, I guess. So I should also note for anybody who may be confused, I am not Benji Ritholtz. So we have like only half of the usual X's and O's team. I am neither an X nor an O. But I'm looking forward to putting the spotlight on you as you try to, carry the day for all of the relevant X's and O's questions that we may get tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I can't. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, there's so much I feel like that's in my head swirling around in terms of this next offseason. I think I'm sure we're gonna get some great questions. I'm sure we're gonna be able to have some good conversation. There just seems like I have a little anxiety about where this offseason may be headed, but I feel like it'll be a good session just to sort of flesh some of this stuff out, I think.
Well, before we get to any actual questions, why don't I ask you, why do you have anxiety and what is that anxiety related to?
Well, it's related to our two superstars in these extensions. One with Jalen is, if he signs it, if he doesn't sign it, I don't think it affects much. If he signs it, obviously it's going to be a major deal for the Knicks going forward. But if he doesn't sign it, it's not going to lend a cloud over this offseason. But
no one thinks he's going anywhere. It's purely a financial decision.
And then the flexibility going forward, the situation with Randle, as our own Jeremy Cohen tremendously pointed out in a great thread on his Twitter feed. So if you've not seen that thread where he basically spelled out some of the reasons why, if Randle doesn't sign an extension this offseason, it might behoove the Knicks to consider moving him now, and how much sense that would make, specifically regarding some of the Karl-Anthony Towns rumors that have been swirling around recently. So if this, we really haven't heard much on the Randle front, and if he isn't going to sign that extension, are we headed to a sort of impasse here coming up late in the summer, where I think he could sign in August? And what does that mean going forward? And a team that I said on these airwaves a couple of weeks ago, last time we talked, that they're not going to make a move that's going to damage this season's talent pool. And with that, the idea of Randle not signing, is that now a possibility where they have to make a move because they want to control the asset better going forward, where they might take a little bit of a hit this season, which, as I pointed out on Twitter yesterday, would be a tough pill for me to swallow.
I've been thinking about the situation. I know this is kind of coming to a head now because, CP of Knicks Fan TV, shout out to him. We're doing a meetup in Vegas on the 14th. So anybody who's out at or near Summer League should come and check us out at that. With the cat thing yesterday, I wrote a 2-part newsletter on Karl-Anthony Towns a month ago. It was one of the first things I did of the off season. And it wasn't because, not like CP, I hadn't heard anything about Cat, but I just read the tea leaves and I said, all right, the Knicks have, and at the time, full disclosure, I thought Hartenstein was staying. But I was like, all right, it's a possibility he could leave. Mitch is coming off another, I don't want to say injury-plagued season, but I mean, at the same time, the dude played 30-some-odd games between the regular season and the playoffs. I mean, it is what it is. So there was uncertainty at the center position. There was the looming Randle contract thing. And there's, the fact that again, we've had the Julius Randle discussion. He's an incredibly gifted player. He's an imperfect player, and recent track record of NBA teams would suggest that if he is your second best player, it's going to be tough to get all the way to the tippity top of the mountain, which is where the Knicks hope to get. So for all those reasons, I'm like, all right, well, who are the players out there that could potentially check the most boxes if the Knicks felt that they needed to do something? And the arrows, and we don't have to even get into the CAA stuff, the arrows kind of pointed to Towns without a whole lot other great candidates. I guess I'll say that.
Yeah.
Not that Karl-Anthony Towns is a perfect player. God knows he's not. We'll probably get into it tonight. But there is a reason why I think the Knicks would look at that. And I think there's a reason why, for more financial reasons, why the Timberwolves might look at that. And at the end of the day, this stuff comes down to it sounds cold to put it this way, but comes down to, like, as much as I want to hear from you about the X's and O's of it. This is an asset play. It's a valuation game. We have a guy that matters X to us. Can we find anyone out there who's going to value him at somewhere in that same vicinity, and in turn give us something that checks enough boxes for us? And the whole center uncertainty of it. And now I think that goes exponentially so that Hartenstein is gone. So I find it very interesting. I also, and I just wonder how much the Knicks are looking at this Hartenstein departure and the Randle thing, and they're being like, is the best way to approach this the traditional route? We get a guy who plays the sort of center position that we know and we're comfortable with, or do we maybe go a little outside the box?
Well, I mean, that you spoke a lot of truth there, and it's the cold truth about where they are with Julius specifically. The thing I keep going back to is, and there's so many more dominoes that would fall if they made that sort of deal. And again, it would have to be Randle and Mitch for the money, because you're not going to trade any of the other players that could make that money work. So Mitch, there's no other way to make the money work if Mitch and Randle are not a tandem in that trade. So you've now lost, and we can get into some of the X's and O's right now. You've lost Hartenstein. You've lost Mitch, granted 30 games last season. We saw the impact when he played, even the postseason, in terms of his possession by possession. He was a dominant defensive player at times. Is the play here, you spoke non-traditional, that they're going to let Karl-Anthony Towns play 30 minutes at center, 35, whatever the number is, if they're not going to go a traditional center route? I don't know if that works long term. Now, I can understand. Let me just see if my mic is operating. So you got a message that
Kevin's telling us is better now, so you're probably okay.
Okay. Well, again, 30, if you were going to go 30, 35 minutes with Cat as the center, which he has not done in a few years and did not look good doing it when he did do it, you're not only going to have to say, all right, we're going to play this 5-out style of offense. We're going to try to maybe replicate some of these, whether it's the Thunder last year with Chet, maybe it's the Celtics with Porzingis. Now, my pushback right off the bat is you had two-way centers that can be effective on both ends of the court. We know, as much as you're going to buy into Towns as a potential fit as a defensive center, if you're going to say he's average at best, I mean, that to me might be pushing it. He's probably going to be below average at that position. So you're going to go into that with a deficit. And are you better off like figuring out, all right, we're going to bring in Towns. We need to insulate him with maybe not a Gobert or a Mitchell Robinson level center, but just someone that can take some of the pressure off him, because we saw in Minnesota, he could be an effective roamer on defense. His agility as a mover has always been underrated because of his sheer size. He has a higher floor than you think, because he just gets in the way of things. He mucks things up. His hands have gotten better as he's gotten a little bit older. His defense as a power forward, we saw it he was a integral part in a great defense. We have not seen him be a great play on a great defense consistently at center. So if that's where the Knicks are going, I have a lot of questions about like what scheme are you running. We saw him in drop earlier in his career. He was a absolute tragic defender in drop. I don't think it's gotten much better, maybe a little bit on the edges. If you're going to have an aggressive pick and roll coverage where he's showing and he's hedging hard, he can handle that. Now, is that something Tibbs is going to go to consistently? Because that would be a departure from how he's played, how he's wanted to play as a defensive coach over the years. So a lot of question marks sort of are swirling in my mind regarding that. But I do understand the asset aspect to this, and that may just be what this is all about. But it is worth sort of fleshing out, like, all right, if Towns is here, what is the next move? Is there a next move? Is it just like you bring back Achua and he's now Towns your starting center? Well, I mean, that's something it's worth talking about.
I think, and again, the money part of it makes it tough. And again, this is an X's and O's podcast. This is or a live stream. This is not a cap or no cap. This is not a cream. I love all these acronyms. But I do think it's interesting that they continue to, it seems, or just at the very least they did at one point, kick the tires on Kessler. And because the thing about Kessler that makes him appealing, other than the fact that he is obviously as opposed to Karl-Anthony Towns, he's the opposite of that. He is the picture perfect Tom Thibodeau defensive center, certainly. He also makes $2 million. So unlike maybe some other centers, even like Nick Richards makes $5 million. Like at the money that you're talking about, where the Knicks would have to ultimately send out more money than they are taking back in the deal, and at Karl-Anthony Towns' number, I actually don't think that they would do that type of deal without also getting a more traditional five that they would feel comfortable playing for at least like whatever 25-ish minutes a night. And again, it's like there's not a whole lot of really good ones out there, let alone really good ones that are making dirt cheap money. Is there a world where the Knicks can get Towns and Kessler in the same deal? They don't really have a lot of assets left. So I don't know that that's feasible. It probably isn't, but I just wonder if that isn't part of their calculation as well.
Well, yeah, and this will be the last thing before we can open up.
Yeah, then we'll get into the
questions. But the idea of Kessler, you spoke about the defensive end, and clearly he can do some of the things that Gobert can do, or Mitchell Robinson on that end, but he's also a really strong rim runner. So we saw Towns really develop a nice partnership with Gobert, especially out of their horns action, where Gobert would actually be the primary pick and roll ball handler. His lob throwing got better year after year as he played with Gobert more and more. So that is a weapon that you would like to utilize if you're the Knicks. I would assume if Towns is on your roster, like have someone that could take advantage of one of Towns' best skills, which is his passing out of especially for his size as a pick and roll ball handler, like it's really good. And the Knicks, as presently constituted, if Mitchell Robinson is in the deal, wouldn't have that guy to really take advantage of that, unless you're saying But I just don't think a Sims Towns pairing works on the defensive end. So Kessler, bringing him in, whether I don't know how realistic that would be, but it would make me feel much better about the sort of like pairing and Towns going forward, because you can, as I said, you can sort of insulate him a little more and try to do a little bit with what, replicate what Minnesota did with the good wing defenders and a really great or excellent 5 defender.
My guess, and this is quite literally just that, it's a guess, is that I wonder if the genesis of this rumor is the Knicks kicking the tires on the possibility that Minnesota is maybe more desperate to unload the Towns contract as opposed to Towns the player than they have publicly let on since the season ended. Because if they were willing to essentially get out of the Towns business without getting a whole, like basically like we'll try to get the best replacement, and like you could argue that Julius Randle's probably the best replacement that they could find. When you go through the rosters and you're like, all right, who's actually trading for this guy? You could even argue that there's maybe a gap between Randle and whoever the next best guy is that they could get. If they're just looking to get out of that money, and they might even be willing to throw in. Now they don't have a lot of draft assets left. They traded pretty much everything, but to the extent that they have anything left that they could throw in, or at the very least that not ask for a pick.
Right.
And so then it's, you're the Knicks, you're basically just taking on the money, and then you have whatever draft assets left to throw in for Kessler. I don't know. We'll see. I have a funny feeling this is probably not going to happen, but I do think it's an interesting topic of conversation because of where the Knicks are. And as you started with the Randle situation, I mean, until he extends, it's not going to go anywhere. So,
yep.
On that note, we got Kevin on the ones and twos tonight. As usual, anything you guys have on your mind, let it out, and we will start taking questions right now. As soon as we get a question on the screen. All right, Matthew Stein, Mitch for Vooch. I'm gonna let you handle this one, Deej.
Yeah, it's a no for me. It's probably a no for the team. It's a no for
you couldn't throw a dog in there.
The coach. Yeah, it's just I saw I think he's a friend of the show. Has Mr. Berman ever been on the KFS airwaves?
Oh yeah, Bert. We did a little farewell for.
That's right. Yeah,
Mark when he retired. Yeah.
That. Yes. So he got the internet going with a little Şengün rumor threw out there. Like Vucevic, Şengün kind of fits in this mold, and he's done a great job sort of talking about the archetype the Knicks prefer at center. Like these offense first centers, just they're not sort of where the Knicks are going, especially with Brunson and where you're getting offense from this team. Vucevic, yeah, he does some nice things as a pseudo stretch five, although his shooting comes and goes, and just not defensively has gotten worse. He might help someone because the Bulls might be interested in moving off him, but he's not a fit for this Knicks team. I'll just put it that way.
The fallacy of Vooch as a stretch five, I mean, it's just that he had one season where he shot over 40% from three, and it was exactly 40%. After that, he had a season that's now 5-6 years ago, shot 36%. 2 years ago, he was a hair under 35%. Last season, he's a 29% shooter from three. Like that's
wow.
And 55% from two, which for a center is like that's not that special. Like I remember when they gave him the extension, it was 3 for 60. Everybody was like, "That's fine." I was thinking to myself going through who's the winning team, the team that's trying to compete for anything real, that is going to have Nikola Vucevic as their starting center. He's not that anymore. The offense does not justify the defense. Şengün, I think, is a different story. Şengün's an incredibly gifted offensive player. Obviously, it requires you to run at least some of your offense through him, which would be it'd be interesting on the Knicks, but we'll see. Maybe we get a question about that.
Yeah, and then also he's up for an extension now. I believe
he is up for an extension now. It would not kick in for another season.
Yeah. So I just in terms of the Knicks books, like I don't know if they want to invest what he would require because he's a really good player, young, and I'm sure he's due a significant payday coming up in his extension.
Yeah.
And I like him as a player. I just don't see how, he's improved as a mid-range shooter. Maybe the 3-point shot maybe comes around in a couple of years, but he's pretty paint bound. He dribbles a lot. He takes a lot of air out of the ball. And I just don't. You pair him with Brunson, and you see like some of the clashes that would present.
Yeah, like and Berman also mentioned Duran in that same tweet, like. Lots of different types of centers, which makes me, again, just kind of wonder, is New York canvassing the league to see, hey, can we get any of these guys at a 60 cents on the dollar or something? So, yeah. All right. Next up, we have a question from Brian Smith. What's going on, Brian? Hey, guys. First ever Super Chat. Well, welcome aboard. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Brian.
What conceptual changes, if any, can we expect to see defensively by replacing DiVincenzo with Bridges in the starting five?
Well, right off the bat, I think Bridges, and this is where his defensive presence is going to be just, I think, huge for this team. He's going to be the primary point of attack defender anytime the Knicks play a point guard with high level offensive capabilities. So that's like, if you think about the playoffs, how much did the Knicks struggle to contain Maxey? How much did they struggle at times to contain Halliburton? You know, they would have success, but it would be fleeting. And they would throw, whether it was DiVincenzo would get shots at these guys, it was McBride, it was Anunoby. I mean, the Knicks were searching, and it was, as I've talked about, ever since when they traded Grimes, they lost their best point of attack defender. They didn't have any replacement for him on the roster. They really were missing that in the playoffs. Bridges does a lot of those things as a screen navigator. He's excellent contesting from behind. Like, he really is phenomenal against smaller guards. That to me is going to unlock the Anunoby, which to me would be like his perfect role, where you can now have him be your roamer. I've like made the comparison to like an Ed Reed, like an elite NFL safety, where he can just be, you put him where you need him and he can just wreck things on the back line, which he did at times in the Philadelphia series. And to me, that was lost a little bit if he's also going to be try to be your number one option against some of these smaller quick guards, which I don't think is his strong suit anyway. And, you know, just watching a lot of Phoenix Bridges of late, I watched one game from December 2021 where he had the primary matchup against Dame Lillard. It was 38 minutes. He did not switch on ball at all. He was fighting over every screen. He was contesting. He was forcing in Lillard into mid-range shots. He was contesting some of those long threes from behind. I thought he did a great job of that. And then also when they would switch him out, it would only be on these off-ball screening actions where they would try to limit some of the times he was trying to get through some of those screening actions to maybe limit some of the energy he was expending. So he is a really fine option against most smaller guards. And to me, that is going to be it's going to keep your backline defense in order, because you're not going to have to send as much help. You're not going to have to next your coverage. I mean, there's a lot of things he's going to allow the Knicks to do to stay in their base shell defense. And that is going to, whether it's your drop defense or your wherever Anunoby is on the floor, it's going to enhance all of that. And that's because they will finally have a guy that can do that consistently. Because, you know, as much as I like DiVincenzo as a player, defensively, I thought he was exposed a little bit in the playoffs, whether it's size or his penchant for gambling too much or his lack of strength. Like, there were things that he would struggle with. Bridges cleans up a lot of those actions, frees up Anunoby to do, I think, what he does best, and just keeps the Knicks defense, I think, a little bit more intact. You don't gamble as much and maybe limit some of the corner threes. He just keeps everything sort of in order. And that has to start at the point of attack, which the Knicks really struggled with containing last year, especially when they traded Grimes, and even a little bit before that.
Yeah, it's I've mentioned this before, but it's funny hearing, you know, folks in Dallas talking about like, oh wow, Quentin Grimes might be their best point of attack option now that Derrick Jones Jr. is off the team. Yeah, and it's like, Mikal Bridges doesn't need to be like a shutdown guy for this to make a big impact, but just the like what you just said about, you don't have to compromise anything else. Like, you know, in the game that you watch, I think we even said like Dame got his points. Like it was
like 31 points on 30 shots or 35 on 31 shots. Like it was a high point total, but he worked for them. Like it was a lot of, he took a lot of shots that were maybe not shots that was not his plan A, plan B. It was like his plan C, like mid-range fallaways, like things like that. He wouldn't necessarily go to as his like first option.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. You just have to make these. I mean, because look, the way offenses are, and like the best offensive guards, especially, are in the league, and how they can get points, like they're going to get them. But just to be able to have a guy like that who's going to make these guys work, and then I see, this is where I lean on you guys, because I have to think that when you get a second one of these elite wing defenders, the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts, because of how there's like kind of a trickle down effect. Mm-hmm. And, you know, which is why, again, it makes sense that they made the investment that they did.
Yeah. And, you know, this is just maybe like a cautionary thing, because when I watch him, he's different than Anunoby, different than like a Lou Dort. Like he doesn't shut you down in an overly demonstrative physical way, not like a Marcus Smart. Like I wouldn't consider him like a take your soul type of defender where he's going to just like prevent you from getting the shot off. He's going to force a pass away. Like he'll give up looks, but it's like he takes away some of the easier stuff, and he's winning on the margins almost consistently. And just getting and that over, you extend that over like 1,000 shots, that matters. That is a big deal, and you just feel comfortable with him handling matchups that typically a 6'6" wing is not usually going to be tasked with handling, and do it with high level ability. So like guarding the Maxis, guarding the Lillards, like these small guards, Trae Young, like there's a lot of them, and you need someone
Dame.
that can Dame, you need someone that can handle that. And he's as good an option as you're going to find because of how slender he is, because he has great technique, getting skinny around screens. He's always leading with his hip. He's never showing his chest. Like he does all these like really high level stuff that you may not notice, but if you like watch him, you see all these little things that he's doing that just over time, they're like these small little victories that adds up to like a high level defender that is going to just keep your defense in order. And he should theoretically, because he's going to have less offensive load, revert back to some of that Phoenix stuff where he was close to winning the Defensive Player of the Year.
Yes, finished second to the aforementioned Marcus Smart. All right, next up. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate the question and the contribution. Sam, what's going on, Sam L? I want to talk about Julius at the 5 for 15 to 20 minutes per game as a solution to the backup 5 issue. It's not Tibbsian, but JB, Dante, Bridges, OG, Julius is our best 5. Well, I'm going to just tack on a question to the end of that, which is, who's actually the 5 in that scenario? Because to me, right, I think whether you're talking about the 5 on offense and the 5 on defense, there's two different answers.
Yeah, and I think the Knicks would invert those. I think Julius would be your theoretical 5 on offense. Benji's talked about like, can he tap into some of the New Orleans style of play where he's actually rolling to the rim? Even this is, I don't know why this game popped up, but I was watching some of Knicks Bulls from RJ's rookie year. That was the Marcus Morris, Bobby Portis. Oh, it was a Bobby Portis game. I just happened to like watch randomly.
Was that their second win?
It was early in the season.
I think it was their second win. If it was
he had like
Portis
13
game,
or 14 in the fourth quarter. It was like the revenge game. But excuse me. A lot of that was Julius in that fourth quarter as a short roll and a rim runner. And it was just interesting to see that player, which, it's only, it's several years ago, but he still has that ability. And you saw him he made one pass on a short roll to Portis in the corner for a 3. Like he has that ability, and it's on him. And we talked about this with Benji last time we were on about like, is he willing to be that sort of offensive weapon versus strictly popping or strictly trying to work his way into a mismatch, which he tends to do on some of these pick and rolls of last couple of years anyway. And then on defense, you're right. I mean, OG would be, I think, the 5 for in most cases, especially against, we know against Philadelphia, he would get the Embiid matchup. Randle in a drop is not tenable. But I also want to know, I also want to know, like, what kind of Julius are we getting as a roamer, as a wing defender? Because if he's going to be your 4 on defense, it's a lot of wings he'd be, think about what that would look against Boston. You think about what that will look like against Philadelphia if it's Paul George, or even like a Kelly Oubre who can slash and cut and just move without the ball and do things. Like Julius would really have to be aware of things and not fall asleep, not get back cut, not get face cut. A lot of these things that he has shown propensity to allow would have to be cleaned up if you're going to have an effective defense with that sort of alignment, which, is certainly something I would experiment with, I would hope would work eventually. Maybe this is something they don't go to a ton in the regular season, but is there like playoff, I hate the death lineup moniker, but their version of that, because you can really like get like the best version effort wise of Julius, and it can possibly work. I also am a little wary about going to it too often and wearing down Anunoby, matched up against some of these 5s. So that's something they would have to consider as well.
That's where the 15 to 20 minutes a night. Like that's like even the Warriors. I mean, I don't have the lineup data in front of me. I would venture to guess that even at their peak, when they were really going to Draymond at the 5 the most, I don't know, were they doing that like 15 to 20 minutes a night, pretty much every night? I feel
Probably
like
not,
no.
and not in the regular season. I would
No,
say
not in the regular season. In
yeah,
the
playoffs
playoffs, different animal.
possibly. And Draymond is also he's like 250 pounds. Like he's not as long, he's not as tall. He might be as long as OG because his wingspan is insane, but
Yeah.
he is a different body type where he could just he's stronger in the lower body. He's a little bit more stout. He's played big man defense his whole life. Like it's not a new thing. And he's like, in terms of his acumen, he's top 5 all time. Like he is a special brain as a defender. And not to say Anunoby can't sort of emulate some of that. I think he can. And it's certainly a lineup the Knicks, if they're not going to have a competent backup center, should go to. And offensively, it should be a phenomenal lineup.
To me, if we wind up with an offseason where now, actually, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing this is probably not going to be possible. I was going to say where they acquire Nick Richards and they re-sign Precious Chua, except they're not going to be able to. They could get to the money on Richards, but it would require them trading away like some of their rookies, and like I don't think they want to do that. So it sounds like it's going to be either one or the other, because the easiest way to get Richards obviously is to just sign and trade Precious. But let's just say, for argument's sake, do a sign and trade. Precious goes to Charlotte, and Richards comes here to New York. If they did that move, it would be a signal to me, at least, that they really thought they were going to need to go to this smaller lineup for something like 15 to 20 minutes a game in the playoffs. Because Nick Richards, to me, profiles as the sort of guy, he could play 20-ish to 25 minutes a night for you in the regular season. And then you know, presumably Mitch is here and he plays the rest of the time. You know, and if someone gets hurt, you know, you get Sims in the mix and the Huckporty kid or whatever. If they made a play for, if they gave up what it would take to get Kessler, that would be more of an indication to me that like we're sticking with the traditional path more, because again, that's a serious outlay.
Yeah, and it would cost a significant amount of assets for what the Knicks have left. So yeah, I would agree with you on both ends.
Thanks, Sam. That's a good question.
Thank you, Sam.
Next up, Jessica. What's going on, Jess? F cats forever. Cat never. Dogs yay. Cat nay. So we got someone who's not a cat fan here. It's interesting. Yeah, sorry, go.
Well, no, go ahead. I mean, are you talking about just like the ones that are pro cat ones, or do you think there's been more negativity with the idea than you anticipated?
I think for a player that has the statistical resume that Towns has, I don't know the last time I remember a player that is as universally derided as he is. And we know the reasons why, like the way he talks about himself as like, I'm the greatest, big man shooter of all time, the way he fouls out seemingly of so many big games, like the flailing turnovers and like the running into like 3 bodies, and then like what did I do here? But at the end of the day, for me, it came down to, like, I think before this year, coming up small anytime. Not that the Timberwolves had a whole lot of playoff games, but like he didn't come up big last year. He had a couple good games maybe towards the end versus Denver, but they went down in that series early. He was genuinely awesome versus Denver for the most part. He wasn't perfect, but he was really, really good versus Denver. He was a lot more good than bad. He was the second best player in that series on a team that beat the defending champs. And then against Dallas, he struggled a lot,
And then also defensively and this is where I think some of the shine has come back a little bit, is that his defense against Jokic was pretty phenomenal. I mean, I'm not high on Cat as a defender, but I can't deny, and it's juxtaposed with like Gobert struggles. So you had that sort of comparison that was like in our face. Like Gobert could not keep Jokic from getting him put under the basket, and then you have Cat fighting and clawing and pushing Jokic out, contesting, forcing passes. Like it was as good a defensive performance on Jokic as I've seen in a long time. So I think that combined with some of his offensive performances, you're right about his Denver overall game last year's playoffs. And then the Dallas series was alarmingly bad at times.
Yes.
Especially offensively, especially with how they put him in the blender on defense. Like but I think what you're getting at is like his greatness is clear as an offensive player. His downsides or his negatives are just so loud. And they sort
That's
of
a great word for it. That's the perfect word for it. They're loud.
They are. They're loud. They're in your face. You can't miss them. Like there are certain guys that can make mistakes. You can't. He doesn't let you miss them either because of like how he reacts to every foul with the what did I do? It's like that whole thing. And there are certain things he does that he just has. He's always been foul prone. He's always been turnover prone as a driver. These things are baked into the player. I don't think you can really clean them up. But his gifts as an offensive player, especially at center, are. If I would to say he's one of the 15 most talented offensive centers, if you're going to put him in that position in the history of the NBA, like, is that like an insane statement? Like, he's not one of the 15 greatest, but in terms of like what he could do as an offensive player, like there's a handful of guys in the history of the league that could shoot like him, move like him, and then also like be a pretty good passer. Like it's a very short list at 7 feet with his size at 250 pounds. Like it's a phenomenal package, which is why he's so enticing.
So this is where, like you mentioned, he played the great defense against Jokic, where I find it an interesting part of the conversation. I don't want to spend too long on this, but I'll just say like his skills in that package, that's what makes the skills stand out, because there are a bunch of, not a ton, but like there are a lot of players in the league, or enough players in the league that can shoot like him and that have that offensive repertoire. They're just not his size. So there's almost nobody that's his size. The thing that I wonder is, and again, this is where he defended Jokic comes into play. How often does his size really wind up mattering? Like, if he had like that exact same offensive game and he was just like a few inches shorter, you could argue, well, that would actually be better, because in theory, if he was a few inches shorter, he would probably move a little bit better on defense. He wouldn't, you wouldn't have the limitation. Like, because like if you can't play him at the 5, and that's really what we're talking about here, is like, can you play Towns at the 5? Because if you get away with playing Towns at the 5, then all of a sudden the offensive game, yes, you can put him in the conversation for the 15 most impactful offensive centers in the history of the sport. But if you can't get away with playing him at the 5, then does the fact that those skills come in that package, does it really matter? And that's the thing I always come back to.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Minnesota told you what they thought about it. I mean, if they thought Towns was like their future, their center,
but after they extended him, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
I think that's the timeline, and
I'll go confirm that. But I'm fairly certain like they traded for. Well, now I'm doubting myself. Well, anyway, keep talking, and I'll look it up.
Well, I think there's levels to his size that I think do come into play, but it doesn't come into play often in traditional center, like Tibbsian way. We talk about like how Tibbs wants to play. Like he's gonna want his center and drop. He's gonna want his center protecting the rim, being big, contesting. Like those are not traits, despite his athletic gifts, despite his size, that Towns has ever excelled at. Like where he has excelled at times has been as a switch defender, as a hard show pick and roll defender. Yes, the Jokic stuff comes in, and that is certainly big man defense, but you're playing Jokic a handful of times a year. You can't design your center position around the times he's going to play Jokic and defend him well. So he is a very confounding, unique player. And then I just would close on, there has been improvements defensively. I just don't know how much of that was he now has one of the greatest defensive centers of all time playing next to him. He can now tap into some of these agility traits that he has that can pop a little bit more. What does that look like if you remove Gobert from the equation and now Cat is the primary center 30 minutes a night? That is a huge question mark to me.
He signed his extension, and then one day later, the Gobert trade happened. One day later, Towns signed his extension. So it was essentially done at the same time. This is funny. I'm just on Towns basketball reference page. The two player, they do the similarity scores. I don't know how often you spend. Okay.
No, very familiar.
You're familiar. The two players immediately under Karl Anthony Towns in terms of year-by-year similarity scores, Willis Reed and Patrick Ewing. How's that for a funny coincidence? Okay, next up. Thank you, Jessica.
That's great. Thank you, Jess.
Manny Capos. What's going on, Manny? The Cat rumors won't die. Please tell me that we'll be okay on defense if Cat was at center, surrounded by OG McCall, DiVincenzo, Hart, Brunson starting lineup. The thing that I'll ask here, because we kind of talked about this generally already, but I want to hone in on the Brunson part of it. How much more, or maybe a better way to phrase, how much less tenable is it to have a 5 with the defensive issues that Towns has when you have a point guard with the defensive issues that Brunson has?
To me, that's the question mark.
Okay.
Because it is, I know we're leaning on the wing defense. I get it. And Bridges and Anunoby theoretically should be enough that if you had 3 other poor defenders that you can maybe get to like a league average level of defense. Like there is a floor if you have Bridges and Anunoby that you just will be at, despite your lack of rim protection, despite point of attack defense, or despite Brunson being a limited defensive player. Now, if you could tell me that I can lock in OG Anunoby for 70 games next year, like you could sell me a little bit easier on Cat as a 5 and Anunoby as your 4, because I tweeted this last year. And I brought it back just to sort of like revisit it. And I think it holds up pretty well. Like if you want to get the best version out of Towns on offense, he has to be the center. If you want to play Towns at center, and this was Nick specific, you need to, Randle can't be on the team, and you need to be able to get a 4 that could defend and rim protect and be a elite defender. And I said like that guy is not easy to find. Was never thinking Anunoby was a possibility, but he is in theory the perfect 4 to play with Karl Towns and really protect him a little bit. But the problem is in the 20-25 games that Anunoby is going to miss, like what is the outcome there? I'm
not worried. Like I think this team is so stacked, and like, yeah, the defensively in those games, are they going to have issues? Sure. In theory, if they ever did this, they're a minimum of a top 5 offense. Right?
I would think yes. Yeah, I mean, you could say this has the ceiling to be the best offense in the NBA. And I think it would be insane
if they got Towns and they added Towns to Brunson and then all those other. Oh my God,
yeah.
You'd have one non-spacing player.
They've figured out how to be a really good offensive team with smoke and mirrors and offensive rebounding. Like they would be an elite offensive team.
Yeah,
100%.
So I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried again. In the play, so that's why, like you say, the 20-25 games OG is going to miss. I'm worried about just the playoff series where teams are just going to like spam the same action, over and over and over again. Like, is there a way to prevent a really good team from exploiting the fact that you have a weak defender at the 1, a weak defender?
Well, you would have to do the stuff that the Sixers did. You would have to pre-switch. You would have to, whether it's Embiid refusing to get into the initial pick and roll action.
Okay.
If you're going to have and this is again something Tibbs has not been accustomed to doing, but Towns at the 5, I think you would have to sort of rip up his history there with like how Tibbs plays, because it would be a indication that he is willing to, or I don't know if this would be forced upon him. I don't think they would make a move if Tibbs wasn't at least bought into the idea. But if you're
Hasn't signed
going
an
to
extension yet.
see that, there you go, another little piece of anxiety I got to worry about. Like, what's going on there? That's a little odd.
Your guess is as good as mine, man.
Okay, so like if you're gonna have Towns as your 5, you're gonna maybe allow him to guard like the worst wing on offense, on defense. But then
who does Brunson guard?
Brunson, right? That's the part that makes it complicated, because you don't, if you're at high level playoff defense, you don't have a second guy you have to hide on defense. It's rare that you have two.
The Celtics don't even have one guy that you could hide a player on offense,
right.
or a player on defense.
And player on right. So that's where it gets. And look, but the counter could be, listen, who has OG Anunoby and Bridges and Josh Hart, and DiVincenzo could be an effective defender at times. Who has that combination? Those 3-4 guys. Like, maybe history, maybe like what we are accustomed to believing wouldn't be something to lean on too heavily, but it does complicate things. Brunson has always made team building a little bit more challenging than most top 10 players in the NBA, because he's not Jason Tatum, where you can put him on any team and he'd be a seamless fit. He's perfect on the Knicks, but it does complicate things a little bit.
I would argue that he is the only the only guy who is widely considered, and I don't know that he's widely considered this, but like a lot of people have him on their top 10 lists. I would argue that he's the only one on that list that is not at least capable of playing mediocre defense. And like, yes, Jokic, we've had lots of conversations about him, but like Jokic, like he did enough, right?
Yeah.
He did enough. And he's big. That's the thing. He's a huge, giant human being, and he's really smart, and he knows how to like leverage his size pretty well. And
even
again,
Luka's the same way. He's 6'7".
Exactly. Yes.
He when you are 6'7" at 230 pounds, like there is just as much as he won't give a shit sometimes on defense. Like, he's body type just gives him a floor that Brunson can't get to.
We're not talking about that. Brunson always tries. That's not the issue.
Right.
Again, I don't want to make this whole thing about Cat, but the only other thing I keep coming back to with Cat, and I was texting with Benji about this a little bit earlier today, is like, so let's say you don't do the Cat thing and you leave the team as is, you run it back, and you presume starting 5 is your presumed starting 5. Well, if you have Brunson out there and you have Julius out there, is Julius capable of average defense? I think we've seen Julius capable of average defense at times. He's also not exactly a guy who, again, if are you going to trust him to be locked in for 35, 38, 40 minutes of a playoff game on defense to the point where, like, you need him to be to win 4 playoff rounds? Let's just say he could be okay on that end. And then you have Mitch, and I know it's only one team. I know the Celtics are only one team, and there's a lot of other teams in the East. Who knows? Knicks may not even play the Celtics this year. But can you still consider Mitch? And this isn't a Mitch thing. This is just like any traditional 5. Can you count him as a plus defender against Boston specifically, with what is required to face that team and the 5-out spacing with Porzingis? And it's not like we haven't seen him struggle in that position.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we know, if you're going to say this is an area Towns can be more effective than Mitch, it's some of the more agile ideas of defending pick and roll action, switching, and things of that nature.
He doesn't even need to, as good as him, but just when you factor in the offensive trade-off, you know what I mean? Like, that's obviously not comparable, but
yeah, it's a fast, because like, how much are you building your team against? And this, I don't think it's a fair thing to say the Knicks are only building to beat Boston. Like, the Knicks, I think, are building just a team that could beat most teams, and it just happens to be like the wings are what this league is desperate to have. But we saw Minnesota sort of have a team that can beat Denver. Then you play a
They've
Dallas
lost,
team,
yeah.
and it doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, Mitch against certain teams, and you can maybe throw Indiana in the mix, Milwaukee potentially at times.
That's a
there
good
are
one.
certain teams that he is just not a highly effective defensive player. Now, those are you have to win, in my mind, 50 plus games. I think home court is important. I think there's things that you have to do in the regular season to get you to a good spot in the playoffs. But your point's well taken about like against certain teams. Mitch is not an elite defensive center. He is elite against a lot of defensive centers in terms of his possession to possession performance. But against some of the best teams, we've seen it. He's not.
Yeah. That was good. Thank you, Manny. And shout out to everybody watching and joining us tonight. Juanon, what's going on, Juanon? I was just writing an answer to a mailbag question you had submitted before, coming to a newsletter near you soon. What's our plan to find the minutes to keep Hart and DiVincenzo happy if they're both coming off the bench? I think this is a great question. Randle at the 5. Seems like this roster is incomplete unless Tibbs wants small ball. Hashtag fire Tibbs. Just again, very simple math. You currently have 4 players slotted in as your starting 1, 2, 3, and 4 who, like, they are 35-minute a game players. Like, there's just no universe where Julius Randle, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Jalen Brunson in a normal competitive NBA game, like, are not gonna be out there for 35 minutes. And do the math. If at spots 1 through 4, that leaves 13 times 4, which is 52. And 52 divided by 2 is 26. And again, that's divided by 2. So now forget Deuce. Deuce is now getting 0 minutes in the scenario where Josh Hart and DiVincenzo are getting 26 minutes a game. And these are 2 players who, pretty much led the league in minutes for the latter half of last season. So I'm not saying they need to do that or that they want to do that. I'm sure Josh Hart will bitch if he plays too few, too many. Nobody cares about that. But I do think that there is some sort of sweet spot that needs to be reached.
Yeah, and Juanon makes the point. I mean, the only way to extend it is to have Randle at the 5, and then you get DiVincenzo, you get Hart more minutes that way.
Or you shake up the roster.
Well, yeah.
Because what is the other part of again, I know I'm coming off like I'm advocating for this, but I'm at least trying to see where their thought process is with, again, if they're interested, whether it's Towns or Senjun or like any play where you're sending out Randle and you're bringing back a 5 just to be able to get to slide the starting lineup down. Now OG's your 4, now Mikal's your 3, now Devo is your starting 2, and now all of a sudden Josh Hart, like Devo plays his minutes, Josh Hart plays his minutes, you have minutes for Deuce. It doesn't become this strain, I think, on everybody.
Yeah. See, I would be more concerned about this. I feel like it's a valid concern and something that it has to be. It's the first year Tibbs is really going to have to manage this, where you have this many legitimate, like, starting caliber players to play. Yeah. If it wasn't Bridges as being the guy that sort of caused this ripple effect, I think I would be more worried about it. Like, does Bridges being the one to move both those guys, or not one, one of those guys, but like create this minutes crunch here, does it make you less concerned that it's going to be a problem? Because I don't think they went to the Hart and DiVincenzo and got their clearance or got their buy-in before the trade was made, but they seem excited about it. They have to know this is going to have this ripple effect in terms of their minutes, and they must, on some level, at least now, and maybe it's going to change once games start and you realize, man, 24 minutes on a Friday night against the Hornets is like, that's not awesome. Like, I'd rather play 35. Or if there's a losing streak and things start to like come up, like I get that there could be the potential for things to bubble up as the season moves along, but I don't know. I feel like the culture, and this is something that they keep talking about, is strong enough to maybe tamp some of this stuff down or keep it from becoming a big issue.
I'm not worried about the culture necessarily, but I don't know. I think I wonder how they would feel, both of those guys, but DiVincenzo in particular. DiVincenzo, because the one difference between DiVincenzo and all the rest of these guys, DiVincenzo hasn't gotten paid yet. I know he signed a new contract a year ago, but that contract looks like, I mean, Jesus, look at some of the contracts that have gotten signed this summer, and DiVincenzo's sitting around looking like, wait a minute, I just averaged like 20 points a game in the playoffs, or damn near 20 points a game in the playoffs, and I was arguably the second best player on my team. That was a game away from making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. And now I'm sitting here and I'm like, I might, I'm gonna have to struggle to get 20 minutes in a game like that. I have to think those guys in the back of their mind be like, all right, I'm gonna have patience, and I'm gonna trust no pun intended, trust the process. But like, at some point, I have to think DiVincenzo is gonna like be like, all right, well, at some point, I've proven I could do this. That's the thing. We've seen it already. We know what it looks like, and he was awesome.
Oof, that's a tough one. He's the one guy, right? I know Brunson's underpaid, but he's going to his contract.
He's gonna get a max, and then he's gonna get another max in 3 years when he,
And then Hart, I would say, is probably fairly paid for what his production is. I don't think he's underpaid. Would you?
Yeah, they gave him the most money that they could give him.
Yeah, so I'm sure he's comfortable with where he is. DiVincenzo is. And then Bridges too, but he's the one that's locked into 35 minutes. So you would assume that where his trajectory as a player, maybe his upside earnings is limited, not being the number 1 or number 2 option, but he's going to get a significant contract extension from the Knicks, I presume.
He'll get $30 million a year minimum, and that would be a bargain.
The DiVincenzo aspect to it, it's interesting, because if he's 24 minutes a night and he's averaging 10, even if the efficiency is like really strong, teams are going to look at that and they're going to have less of a sample size to say, all right, he's a guy you can commit to being a legitimate 20-point a game scorer in the NBA for the next 3-4 years. Like, let's pay up, and we can put him in our starting rotation as a 2 guard and feel great about the next 4 years. I think if he's now going to be your 6th or 7th man for the next several years, when he is due for a contract, that will give some teams pause, and rightfully so. For if you're a team thinking about bringing him in, that is a fascinating look at a player that you would think would be fine with his role currently, but also has this other aspect of like, he needs to maximize his earnings as well.
Which, again, nobody should be surprised that there are names of centers coming up. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Juanon. That was good. I hope we sufficiently answered that question. Kevin Danishevsky, wouldn't be a live stream without Kevin chiming in. John, what about getting Richards for seconds in a separate deal? I'll get back to this in a second. Let me read the rest of the question. DJ wanted to follow up on our Twitter debate. Would you play Hart over DiVincenzo if they got Cat? In terms of Richards for seconds in a separate deal, again, you still got to send out money. So I'm unless I'm misinterpreting something or misunderstanding something, and I certainly could be. Precious sign and trade for along with a couple of seconds for Richards. I don't know that you need to give up that much for Richards, do you? I mean, is Richards worth Precious and 2 seconds?
I don't think so. I mean, you look at some of his impact metrics, and he's 26, going to be 27, I think, during the season. Like, I think those guys are worth a second or 2 seconds. Like, I don't like maybe a starting center, but probably not like a good backup. That's to me what the market would bear.
Yeah. And then I have no idea what your Twitter debate was, but so I'll let you take that one.
It was the Cat stuff and like how it would work, and his Kevin's point was, if you have Cat and then he referred to the Knicks would have 3 awesome defensive players around him.
Oh yeah, there you go. I saw that.
Yeah, OG would be an awesome defensive player. I think Bridges is an awesome defensive player. He was considering Hart or he's considered DiVincenzo in that category. And to me, like, I think DiVincenzo can be a good defender, or it's certainly like a piece of a good defense, but I don't consider him nearly at the level of, forget Anunoby. I think he's tiers below both those guys, put it that way. There's just a size limitation. There's a strength issue. I think he gambles a little bit too much, but he's an effective defensive player. In terms of like the lineup, so if you have Cat, OG, Bridges, Brunson, DiVincenzo, or Hart as your fifth spot.
I think it's interesting.
Yeah, because you can argue either direction. You probably, I mean, listen, you have enough offense to where, like, if you want to, the thing I like about Hart is like his transition ability as a one-man fast break is really important, especially like not just the stuff he creates for himself, but it's like he's gotten really good at creating threes in transition. And then you have Cat as like your trailing big in that sort of alignment. You can really do some things there. I'd probably lean Hart, but you can just want to go maximum spacing, maximum offense, and just say, let's be like a legitimate, like, best offense in basketball. And DiVincenzo probably would have to be the starter in that sort of alignment. But it's interesting. I think you can go either way. They're very different players, but can both be, I think, effective in the on the offensive end with those other four.
I too, like, there's a part of me that skews Hart maybe, and yet at the same time, I'm looking it up right now. Post All-Star break last year, most threes in the league, Dante DiVincenzo, 119 on 38.4%, ahead of a couple of guys named Klay Thompson and Steph Curry and Luka Doncic. Those are the next three names. Like, the guy, he was literally the most productive three-point shooter in the league for a not insignificant stretch of the season. And like, I'm looking at the way that, like, we all know how the league is skewing. And I love Josh Hart. I'm Josh Hart's biggest fan in the world. I'll defend him until the end of time. But yeah, like, you know, to get that level of shooting out there with those other guys, it's just like, come on. It's pretty
that
awesome.
It's like we all know DiVincenzo was an incredible shooter, but when you bring up those numbers, like, it's really off the charts. And you think about how he got his looks. Like Klay is a phenomenal movement shooter. Like, he could fly off like multiple screens. Like, they work to get him looks. Steph as a relocator, when he doesn't have the ball, his pull-up ability. Like, DiVincenzo would just literally catch the ball with a defender like in his airspace, and because he knew, like, all right, this 28-foot three just might be the best shot we're getting this possession, like, why not? And he would make like a reasonable percentage of these like insane looks, and then make, you know, he was probably 45% of wide open threes, like something insane like that. Like, he was, for a non-movement shooter, for a guy that you're not running a ton of like floppy or off-ball screen actions to get him looks, to get that many threes up and to make that many with that volume, with the lack of ancillary playmaking that was on this team, is just an extraordinary shooting performance that is one of the greatest. I mean, it's one of the greatest in the history of the Knicks in terms of like quality of looks and volume, and all that stuff.
It is the greatest. Shout out to Alex. Greatest in terms of the number of threes made. So yeah, we'll always have that. Thanks, Kev. Appreciate that. Andrew P, how to best use Mikal on offense? Playmaking reps, please. What do you think about that, Deej?
Yeah, well, I think his primary, and you guys, if you ever want to watch some of his 21-22 season, and then the following year before he got traded to the Nets, in terms of like where I think, this is just my opinion, like the maximum version for the Knicks of Mikal Bridges lies, because you would get him playing off Chris Paul, playing off Booker, playing off Ayton a little bit, and just being this elite floor spacer that not only could catch and shoot, but would be so dynamic beating a closeout. And that to me is like, we just, this is a great question because we talked about DiVincenzo and you're swapping out the greatest 3-point shooter in the history of the Knicks for Bridges. And we should be excited about that. Like, how is that going to help our offense?
Yeah.
It's a fair question. The way I think it helps your offense is that as much as DiVincenzo, and this is going to be a playoff perspective here for a second. When you get to the playoffs and you know teams are going to run DiVincenzo off the line, and we saw in both series, if he wasn't shooting the three with high volume and high efficiency, he really struggled inside the arc. His drives were a mess at times. He shot 34% on drives during the playoffs on 91 drives. Like, these were a decent sample size.
Yep.
I think he shot 41% on 2-pointers during the playoffs. Like, there were some flaws that popped up because teams were ultra aggressive at getting him off the line. You can't do that against Bridges because even if you're not going to be sprinting at him, and maybe it's going to be a little bit more of a control closeout, he has gotten so good at beating a closeout, either moving the ball, getting all the way to the basket, or just dribbling into a two dribble pull up and making that shot at close to 50%. Like, those are the areas where even if you're giving up, and you are giving up the deep 3-point shooting, you're giving up the volume, but what you're gaining in terms of his ability to just destroy closeouts on a night-to-night basis, to me, get you to where you're close to an even swap, or maybe slightly below the DiVincenzo level of offense. If you're going to say the spacing that and the shooting ability of DiVincenzo just carries the day here. And then, like, the advantage of Bridges, of course, is that you can play him with a second unit and feel pretty comfortable with him, like, running as a second option, as a first option at times if there's injuries or Brunson and Randle are both sitting, and feel like you can still get decent looks. The stuff with the Nets, it didn't work out to where I think they wanted as a first option, but those reps were important. And I think there's still ways to tap into some of those development as a passer, as a pick and roll operator, and get a little bit of value out of that. But really, where the value is going to come, it's going to come off the ball as a closeout destroyer, as a transition player, and then as a spot up shooter, as a corner, like 40% corner shooter. Like, there is a lot of versatility there, which I think will be enough to maybe offset what you're losing with DiVincenzo's shooting not in the starting lineup anymore.
Yeah, I was just looking up. So, like, obviously, once he came to the Nets, his role kind of changed, and he was relied on to score a lot more. And as far as I'm concerned, you could probably take this entire Nets season, the one that just passed, and toss it out the window, because at least when the Nets team that he came to from Phoenix was still a good team. Like, they went to the playoffs that year. Like, they were trying to remain competitive. Like, this season had some promise early on, and then just, like, the wheels completely came off. And I don't think Mikal was the reason for that, but he was kind of caught in the crossfire. In that last season in Phoenix, through 56 games with the Suns, I just looked it up. He had 10 games of 6 assists or more. And assists are they are a flawed statistic that they don't always tell us very much. But still, like, I thought that was a nice sign. Like,
he keeps the ball moving. Like, it doesn't stick with him. Like, he just, and that's kind of like just something the Knicks have really heart's good at DiVincenzo. Guys just it's like you make the pass, shot, or drive within a half a second. Like, those are some of the plays that he can sort of keep the chain moving and get the ball to the maybe a better play. So, as you were saying, anyway.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. Good stuff. All right. Is Donovan Mitchell a Knick today? I don't think so. DJ, preferred backup 5, and why? Plus Lowry thoughts. Who's your preferred backup 5?
Well,
we're not cat, conversation.
So Mitch is still on the roster.
Yeah.
Where are we going? It seems that Kessler, I don't want to pay the price if we're going to believe the reports. Ian Begley reported that the A team or teams have offered 2 first-round picks and were rebuffed by Utah. Now, we don't know what type of first. Were they fake first? Like, what, there's probably some context that we're missing, but 2 firsts of any way are going to be worth something, and that speaks to maybe the Utah's valuing Kessler is above where I think the Knicks should go. Richards is an interesting name. He keeps getting thrown around. Good finisher. The defense and the impact, we want to believe like the impact numbers have been bad every year, but how much of that is like Charlotte in the pieces around him? He's interesting, and if he can be had for a couple of seconds, like I probably prefer him over Precious because I think Tibbs would at least feel comfortable with Richards as a true backup 5 in that way. Now you could just go Precious and just really lean into Randle as an OG as your 4 and 5. As I think more about it, like that might be where I would go actually, instead of going the Richards route and trading more assets to get him. Maybe just, and then Sims is still on the roster. I think Precious with like enough of a Randle OG 5 and 4 pairing to at least experiment, and maybe that being like your postseason, go to.
I think if Precious was going to be the backup center next year, he would have already been
he would be here.
signed to a contract. To Jeremy's point, I'll just say in terms of Lowry, makes no sense right now for the reasons I talked about a few minutes ago. There's just no minutes for him at this moment. I think if there was some sort of a roster shakeup and you saw, a couple of key pieces go out in some world, would Kyle Lowry make a lot more sense for this team? Absolutely. All right. Thank you, is Donovan Mitchell and Nick today. I love that you have not changed that name, by the way. Ben Kingerby, what's going on? Ben, can improvement in perimeter defense make up for an iHeart-sized loss of rim protection and rebounding? How does it change our approach?
I don't know if it's going to. Well, I spoke to earlier in the show. It's going to allow Anunoby to be more of a low man defender, because I think rim protection comes from your 5, but also can really come from your 4 man, especially if they're going to be in low man help. And we know that Anunoby can do those things, and that's where, if you're going to be comfortable with Bridges guarding point of attack as a primary defender, you can allow OG to do those things. Now, if iHeart is going to have another like 99th percentile defensive year like he had in terms of dunks and threes EPM, like I don't know if there's just no way you're making that up, if I'm going to be frank about it. I'm skeptical he can replicate that year, because how many guys, unless you're Rudy Gobert, can? But it's still, it's going to be very challenging. It's not only it's Bridges, but it's Anunoby for a full season. So you could still have a top 10 defense with the current roster, especially if you can get 60-ish games out of Mitchell Robinson. Like I think because Mitch can do what iHeart did in many ways, and maybe not against certain teams as we talked about, but in terms of his overall performance can be close to an elite defensive center. So there are ways to do it. The Bridges, I'm excited about the offense. I'm more excited about like what he can do as a defender, not as this, like, as I talked about, shut the water off of every number 1 option, but you're a guy you're just comfortable with, and a guy that can keep your shell intact and not cause rotation, keep your defense in order. That's what he's going to be able to do. That'll be a big help for this team. So it's not necessarily changing the approach per se, because I think unless there's going to be Towns at the 5, like the Knicks are going to play their primary drop defense. But what Bridges will do is he's going to like limit some of those like backline rotations, and showing early help might not be as important if you can play that pick and roll game with Mitch and Bridges and really kind of shut that water off there. So it does just give you more options to or to limit some of the things you have to go to sort of like change up what you want to do and get put in the blender, so to speak. So it's just, that to me is where Bridges really is going to allow this defense to maintain, like, not quite elite level, because I don't know if the talent is there, but like very good team defense.
Well,
Thank you, Ben.
I think the goal should be a top. I mean, the goal should be a top 5 defense. Realistically, if they could be in the top 10, I think that would be pretty good. Thanks, Ben. Good stuff. Brian Smith, what's going on, Brian? Are you worried about Mitch's numbers on defense on shots at the rim with all of these leg injuries? His field goal percentage against was quite poor at the rim last year. So yeah, that's Benji had been putting up those numbers, and I think the numbers from this past year are like so bad that I'm a little think some of that might be noise, but between that and the declining offensive numbers at the rim, it does seem to, like, you put 2 and 2 together, it just he's might not be the same athlete anymore,
Yeah, I don't know if it's noise or how, and I'm not, and this is like maybe I can text XJ and he can help me out to try to figure this out. His impact numbers were great last year when he was playing in terms of like some of the all-in-one defensive numbers. Like,
yes, they were. Yes.
Despite real slippage and rim protection numbers. Now, sometimes it's limiting shots at the rim versus like contesting shots in the rim versus like the defensive field goal at the rim. So there are many factors here, but when he was playing earlier in the year, even with a higher percentage at the rim in terms of like what the opponents are making, like he was talked about as all defense for a reason.
Yeah.
He's 26 years old. If he can get himself into shape and he could stay relatively healthy, I don't see why he can't replicate that again. Like he's in the prime of his career. Theoretically, I know there's been injuries and you don't know how many, it's going to be one too many. And how much athleticism has dropped. Clearly there's been an athleticism decline. I think some of that is by design a little bit because he's had to put on a little bit of weight, and the Mitchell Robinson of summer league rookie year, like that guy, he was a phenomenal, like 99th percentile athlete, but
that dude was a freak.
He really was. Like even like the second year, the Kevin Knox game against Zion, like he was like blocking Zion threes and getting dunks on the other end. Like he was just an incredible athlete that has slipped a lot, but still because of his sheer length and his size and his acumen and his hands and all those things, he still, in my mind, like can be an elite defensive center. I would assume for a full year, his defensive numbers at the rim would stabilize, and you just have to like, and I don't know what the numbers are, but you have to compare defensive shots against field goal percentage versus how many shots are you allowing? How many are you a deterrent? Like those things factor in as well. So, but it's more, it does, you talk about the field goal percentage on offense, like his layup percentage, like he dunks, he's fine. But I think he was at 42% on layups at the rim. Like these are numbers that, and maybe this is because he's worried about getting fouled or what, or a dip in athleticism, but he can't make a layup anymore. And that to me is a concern, especially because you saw Hartenstein really flourish as a non-dunk finisher.
I think I'll just say that I think the Knicks are worried about Mitch. And if you don't think that they are, I mean, like, we wouldn't be hearing all of this noise. Like people keep talking about the play for Kessler as a backup center. Like, man, if you're going to go get Walker Kessler, and I mean, I know a lot of people are like, who cares? It's Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler's like, man, so you want to talk about metrics and some of the numbers that dude has put up over the last 2 years? I think if they're going to get Walker Kessler, they're going to get Walker Kessler to be their guy. He's their center of like the present. He's their center of the future. And that's just one name. And forget all the cat and all the other stuff. So that's my 2 cents to that. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Duran visual variant. I'm going to read this question and then take my. This is what happens when you get old, DJ. I don't know if you have anything. My wife just brought me down my pill that I take at night. Look, here it is. There's my pill. This is not Viagra, by the way, for anybody wondering.
Okay, I won't ask you what it is, but
it's cholesterol. I think this is cholesterol. Is my baby aspirin? cholesterol. There you go. Getting old sucks. So I'm going to read this and then take my pill.
Yeah.
Tibbs already had Towns at the 5, so he should know what to expect and how to use him. Also, assuming they don't trade for him, if Tibbs... also assuming that they don't trade for him if Tibbs doesn't sign off. I'll just say I was kidding before about the Tibbs part of it. I don't think Tibbs is going anywhere. And I will just say what... I don't know who the first person is to say this, but I think it rings true. Even a coach who has maybe failed once, I think coaches are inclined to be like, I'll figure it out the next time, or I'll get it right with this player, you know?
Yep. And okay, so early in Cat's career, he was a drop big, and that's how Tibbs used them. That, as I talked about, that did not work, and he's gotten better at it. He's at times he will play that way for Minnesota when he's the 5, but it's not his strong suit. So I think, yeah, Tibbs, he may have used him a certain way in Minnesota, but I think that there's no evidence that he can bring Cat in here and play how Tibbs has played as a Knicks head coach over the past several years. Like, he would have to adjust. And we saw with Hartenstein his willingness to play more at the level, to, not quite hard hedge, but he would show a little bit more, utilize Hartenstein's more, a better ability to be a mobile big. That's the only way in my mind you can get the best version out of Cat as a defender, as your 5, is if you're going to allow him to show, recover, and utilize his agility, which I know some people, because he's a little clumsy, can talk about as a negative. Despite his giant feet that can trip him up every now and then, I feel like his agility is a strength in considering his size. So I think you have to tap into that. And I think side to side movements he's pretty good at it. He's a good switch defender. He did it a bunch in the Denver series, did it a little bit against Dallas, and he's always been effective at it. You don't blow by him. He gets his body in the way and he contests. So you do those things, you're probably going to give up a mid-range, low percentage shot. And he can do that pretty well. So if Tibbs is willing to tap into that version of Cat, which we've seen in Minnesota over the past couple of years, then I think you can maybe talk yourself into the defense being good enough, especially with the defensive talent around him. But if you're going to play Towns like you did when he first had him, then it's just not going to work. But I don't think that would even be a consideration, because the tape is so bad with him playing in that way that it would be hard to imagine they would use it as the primary defensive coverage.
Yeah. Well said.
Thank you, Daron.
Yes. Thank you, Daron. As quiet, I hope easy quiet. One of those two. Are you concerned about the upcoming offensive role for OG? Is an interesting question. There are dozens of articles hinting at his rumored frustration during his time with Toronto. Oh man, if I wish I could remember Terrell Owens' agent's name, the one who sat up there after was it like a rumored like suicide attempt or something? I think it. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, where she got up there and was like, Terrell Owens has 41 or whatever million reasons to
I have a vague memory of this. I can't vouch.
I remember it well.
Sounds right. Yeah.
We got some breaking news. Saddiq Bey, 3 years, $20 million with the Washington Wizards. That's a really nice little deal for Washington. He may not play this year at all, and now that he's signing with Washington, I would assume he actually does not play, because it's Washington and they're not going anywhere. Or if he does play, it'll be like the last 15, 20 games. But that's a nice investment in a player who is a talented player. And 3 years, $20 million. That's not bad. That's a good thing there.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, back to my Terrell Owens thing. Well, OG Anunoby has 212.5 million reasons to not care about his offensive role. That said, I think it's probably still matters to him. I mean, money talks. Like, I'm going to go back to this one more time. It is. I wonder if that is a small part of the calculation for the Knicks as they continue to potentially bounce around different trade ideas. Like, hey, this is a guy. I know it's only one game, but the last time we saw this dude, he was the best offensive player on the floor, and it wasn't even close. They would have gotten blown out of that game too without him. And it's a shame that what happened, but yeah.
Yeah, that was like the optimized version of OG. It was getting him
awesome.
downhill. They love zoom action for him, which is basically like a pin down into a dribble handoff. But it was the stuff with Toronto was always like he could drive, but when he would get towards the rim, like things would go haywire, whether it be a turnover or a bad shot or a kick out that he wouldn't see. Like things he can get to the drive, but it's the finishing and the stuff. Like the finishing.
We saw some rough
dexterity.
turnovers in the lane here.
We did.
Yeah.
You're right. So I think that's the stuff that you have to be wary about. But there was a couple finishes, like a bump euro on Turner in space. There was a lefty finish, and this was all that game too. You talked about like there was a lot there where he was carrying the offense a bit that you can maybe see. All right, maybe there is something more there, but there just seems to be like a robotic stiffness to him that limits some of the on ball creation. But even in the Philly series, like I was impressed when he couldn't get his drive because Embiid, which wouldn't get out of the paint. So he would just get into that like pull up game and he made like 50% of them, like a decent percentage of like contested pull up J's, and just looked good doing it. So there's signs that he can maybe expand a little bit, but the Toronto stuff, I imagine like all his frustration was like, I need to get paid. And he probably was like, the only way to do that is if I'm averaging 15 to 20 points a game or, close to 20. But he found like you said, he got his money. So I imagine that's going to limit some of the frustration.
There's also a lot of stuff that's come out of Toronto for years now. I mean, the latest thing is, I think it was a Pascal Siakam press conference after he got his extension officially signed. It's talking about how nobody is selfish in Indiana, and this and this is not the first or the second or the third. Like, there's been some not like nasty stuff going on in Toronto in terms of like what some players have been talking about. So I don't, maybe that, like to your point, Deej, about like maybe where some of that stuff is coming from. I'm really excited. Maybe I'm just being naive because this guy probably is what he is. He's 27? No, he's 26. Still, I think he just turned 27. But in terms of like some of the mid-range stuff, right, that we saw in the playoffs, I think that's cool. I'd love to see some more of it. He
phenomenal finisher in transition. Just one of the best in the league. He can't be your second option, but like it's like a third, fourth option to me. Like he's perfectly cast as a great corner shooter and can do a little bit with the ball. If you can get him a little bit, the key with him is always like, can you get him separation from his initial defender? And when he catches, like if he has that space, he can go to work. When the guys can get into his dribble, that's when he can get a little, it can get a little, I don't know, spooky if you're a Knicks fan. And then like his drives, like he doesn't have like ways to nail help has always affected him because he doesn't have like that high pickup where on that like last dribble, like bringing that ball up high. So if they're coming down low to try to like rip that ball out, like you're limiting that. Those are things that he can still develop, but would certainly help. But he showed a little bit in the postseason to where like there's probably a little more there that he showed in Toronto, and I think there's a little more in like his post game against smaller wings that you can maybe go to every now and then. But he got his money. He's 90. He's one of the best defenders in the league, and he does enough offensively to where like it's incredible to have him on your team.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Thank you for that easy, quiet. Kevin Danishevsky with another one. Actually, if we get Cat, just re-sign Precious. I still say if they got Cat, I think they would need a real 5. I just don't think that they would completely punt the notion of having a traditional-ish 5 on the roster. That said, beggars can't be choosers, and at that point, like if they made that sort of move, like I just don't know where that would leave them in terms of what they'd be able to do.
Yeah, it just seems hard to believe that they would. Maybe that's like in the playoffs, as you mentioned. If it's Nick Richards, like you don't go to that to him as much in the playoffs, but in the you need competent defense at the 5 in the regular season. So I think it's something that they wouldn't. It would be a shock to me if they brought in Cat and signed Precious and just went complete like all offense, all small ball all the time. Like it would seem it would be such a departure that it just seems hard to believe. Maybe they end up doing it, but I think they would bring in a 5 that can at least eat up some minutes. And maybe that's like maybe they have more belief in Jericho Sims than I do.
I don't. I would be very surprised.
As would I. Yes.
I think Jericho Sims is a nice to harken back to a conversation you had about Precious Achua, actually. Like with months remaining in the regular season. I remember listening to this, you and Benji. I think Jericho Sims is a nice depth piece. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Okay.
I think that's right.
Thanks,
Thank you, Kevin.
Juanon with another one. Thanks, Juanon, for the generosity. Rudy Gobert's contract is $600,000 more than Randle and Mitch combined. Well, how do you like that? Just don't want that to get lost here with all the cat talk. # fire Tibbs. You trading for Rudy Gobert, DJ? What do you think?
He's gonna get paid, right? Isn't he due for?
He is extension eligible, I believe. I'll double check it right now. I believe he's extension eligible this summer.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think it's the realistic.
Would you do? Is it like just seriously? Just put aside. Forget the. I don't. You can't really forget.
Forget
if it
what?
costs you Randle.
Yeah.
And you're losing Randle's offense, and you're not bringing back an offensive player like Towns. I don't know that you could do that, right?
I don't think you have enough on that end. Even with, I get Bridges, I get his upside as an offensive player. I get what he can do. Look, Gobert he gets a lot of flack. He is, even at his age, and he's still a Hall of Fame level defensive player like today. I understand like what his gifts are. I also know that I don't see Minnesota, and I know this is very Knicks centric, but like
they're not doing that.
See how they would ever consider something along those lines. So it's a moot point, but I'll take this opportunity to say like Gobert gets a lot of garbage thrown his way. I think he's a winning player that is elite at what he does, and is very underrated, but it's not a fit for the Knicks, and I don't think Minnesota entertains this either.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna give you a scorching hot take.
What do you got?
To a lot of people, this might be scorching hot. I don't know if this would be scorching hot to you. I think Tibbs would rather have Cat than Gobert. I think Tibbs knows the value of elite offense.
Yeah, definitely more than he gets credit for. I agree with you.
Just listen to him talk about any star player in pick literally any press conference where somebody asks him about an opposing team's star player and how he gushes about them. Like he values what stars can do on offense. And I think he thinks he's good enough and smart enough, and he has the other defensive pieces to be able to figure out the defensive stuff.
Yeah, I think that's probably correct. Gobert, Anunoby, and Bridges. I mean, it's a fun defensive trio to think about. But I mean, it's not a realistic great idea, but it's a creative one. So Juanon, I appreciate.
We love creativity here.
We love creativity. That's awesome.
All right, thanks, Juanon. A couple more, I think, and then we're getting close to the end here. Gad Candelario, what's going on, Gad? Trade Randle, Mitch for Cat and sign Pascal.
Okay,
sign Pascal Siakam. I think that shit may have stilled. Did you mean someone else? Okay. Actually, we got about 6 more. Okay. Thanks, God, for the comic relief. Free Scotty, how does the team try to backfill JB's role? Oh, not JB Jalen Brunson, JB Johnny Bryant.
Johnny Bryant's, yes.
And then with Dice question mark. I'm just gonna say very politely, Johnny Bryant was not a Tom Thibodeau hire. He was a World Wide West hire. That's not me saying anything out of turn. That was reported. Everybody else on the coaching staff is a Tibbs hire. They have a lot of assistant coaches. They all seem to be very qualified. They brought in Mo Cheeks. Mo Cheeks is a wonderful coach. He's been a head coach in this league. He knows what he's doing. I don't think they're gonna have a problem. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I tweeted the same. Like I just, it's hard to know the impact of an assistant coach. I know Johnny Bryant, he gets there. He's probably got a little more shine to him because of his relationship with a few of the players that former Knicks and current Knicks, and the fact that he's always the one off the bench, like whether it's fouls or whether it's minutes, like he's always in Tibbs' ear. So he's always on camera. There's been like the successor talk with him, which has probably been like a fan fiction thing for a while in terms of Tibbs' replacement. But
probably.
Yeah. They brought in Mo Cheeks, former head coach, that I'm sure is going to be a competent lead. Is he the lead assistant? Like, I don't know if he's official. I don't know
whatever. Like, I mean, like he's, it doesn't matter. Like we know whose team this is. This is Tibbs' team. And they're gonna go as far as he takes them. Thanks, Free Scotty. Lou Boogie, getting Bridges gets Jalen to extend on a cheap max deal. I mean, there's been some talk of that as a possible one-to-one thing. I will just say this for anybody who is did not listen to today's Hoop Collective podcast with Brian and the Tims. If you care to do so, feel free to queue up probably, I don't know, about 15, 20, 25 minutes in, something like that. They talked about the Knicks briefly, and Jalen Brunson's contract extension came up, and I thought it's always telling when one of those guys is like, I don't want to say the thing, like they said, I don't want to get aggregated, so I'm not going to say the thing.
Yeah,
which is what Bontemps did, and then he followed it up with, if there's any player in the league who's going to take that extension, it's Jalen Brunson. So I just don't know how many other ways that Popper, Bagley, like Fred, like everybody has gone right up to the goal line, and they're clearly not at liberty or don't feel comfortable. Maybe just saying like he's going to sign this extension. I would be floored if it could happen 2 days from now. I'd be floored if he doesn't sign the extension.
I wonder if they're not reporting it in a way. I don't know. If it would it feel weird or odd to report that while you have all these other extensions sort of like popping up and these like big dollar amounts, and then you're reporting Jalen Brunson's going to take this like low ball extension, not low ball, but like lowered extension number versus what he can get next year. Then you have like, Cade Cunningham and all these other like, players getting like, I don't know. I don't know what the reasoning behind maybe not going to the goal line, but and finishing the play, but maybe they just don't know fully and they don't have it like lock solid. But
it's entirely possible.
I would assume as well that he's going to take it, but it is like, it would be shocking in a way if you think about like players that have left that amount of potential earnings on the table.
It's unheard of in the league today.
Yeah,
it's just that there's no, that's it. It's unheard of.
Yeah,
that's all there is to it. Thanks, Lou Boogie. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Lou.
OG team, what's going on, OG team? Do we need Randle to be All-Star Randle in the playoffs, or do we just need him to not be a negative on the court when he doesn't have it going scoring wise?
Split the difference, maybe. You don't quite have to be All-Star Randle. Like he doesn't have to be 25, 9-6, but he is. I'm interested in like what the Randle stat line is going to be, just because of like how much is he changing his game with the amount of like creation this team has, which is the most he's probably had as a around him as a Knicks player. He saw Jalen Brunson without him put up numbers that were historic in terms of like some of the 40-point games in the playoffs. So I wonder about, because if you watch Randle earlier in the year, like it was like the offense was played off him more than it played off Brunson at times. That can't be what it's gonna be this season. So then what is the Julius role? Is it gonna be like how are you synergizing the Brunson Randle pairing where it's not just your turn, my turn? Because where they sung last year was Randle creating the help and Brunson as a relocator. That was when they were really great together in terms of like playing directly off each other. The other times it was really just more of a you turn, my turn. So to avoid that, is it Randle at the 5, and then you can really gain some pick and roll chemistry with those two, which they haven't had as teammates yet because they haven't needed it, because they don't run a lot of Brunson Randle pick and rolls. And Randle, when he does run them, when he does screen for Brunson, is not rolling. He's not short rolling. These are things that he's going to have to utilize if he's going to develop a chemistry with Brunson that is a little bit more enhanced than it was last year, and could be a way for the Knicks, because you lose Hartenstein, you're losing that ability for Brunson to get into the paint and then find an outlet that's not just a kick out for a 3, but also like a good effective rim attempt at the basket. Randle could be that player where he could get a bounce pass where Mitch is usually going to fumble that. He could get a bounce pass. He could finish it without a dunk. He's adept at doing that. Mitch can't do that. So if you're going to have Randle as your 5, how is he going to be effective as a player with Brunson controlling most of the offense? It's going to be rim running. It's going to be short rolling. It's going to be doing those things, which he hasn't done yet with as a Knick with Brunson. But it's certainly going to be a necessary component for them to really play off each other and enhance each one's capabilities.
I think there is an argument that among teams that can either have a legitimate shot at the title or can even like talk themselves into having a shot at the title, I think the Randle is the most interesting player in the league this year. Either him or Dame, because Dame was like a top 3 offensive player 2 years ago, and then last year he was like probably not a top 25 offensive player, 20, 25. So he was like, does he have a bounce back in him? So that's the question there. Throw Cat in this conversation because but it seems like we kind of know what, like we've seen Cat in this offense, like with Gobert and everything. Like we kind of know what it is. Randle, we have a month of evidence with him with this version of this team. That's it. And we're just sitting here extrapolating what he could be from a perspective of like, is he willing to do this? Is he able to do this? What does the roster look like around him? Where is he going to be playing the 5? Is he going to be playing the 4? Like there are so many questions, and you look at everybody else on this team, we know what we are getting from all of these, for the most part. We know what we're getting from all the rest of these guys.
He's the biggest question mark on the team.
It's not even close.
Not even close.
Yeah. And again, yep. I would argue he's the biggest question mark in the entire. And again, that puts like a, when you say somebody's a question mark, there's an implication like, well, that means you don't believe in them. No, it's like when you consider the range of outcomes, I don't think it's an overstatement to say he's as big a question mark in the league as anybody.
Yep.
Thank you, OG team. It's a good question. Hush Zoo, what's going on, Hush? Seeing all these reports make me feel like Randle is being shopped heavy right now. Him not taking an extension feels like the beginning of the end. Well, he can't take it yet. He's not eligible to take it until August 6th, so we have a little bit of time, or August 3rd, excuse me. So we have a little bit of time until he's eligible for that. I don't think he's being shopped. I think the Knicks are doing due diligence. I think the Knicks are clearly calling around asking about players and their value and this and that. But they also probably have an idea, I'm sure, of what Randle wants, and they certainly have an idea of what they want to give him. The most interesting thing to me is Randle could extend for 4 years and $45 million a year. Is it possible that he would not sign for that if offered? That he would want more? Like, I think there's a lot of people who are assuming that the Knicks aren't going to offer the full four for 181.5. I'm not so sure about that. I wonder if they wouldn't offer the full four, and if I just wonder. That's all.
Well, and I'm sure the Knicks have done the exercise you've done, we've talked about it, and I've done it. Like, where's the trade partner for Julius? If you're gonna shop him, like, just do the exercise. There are just not a lot of realistic trade partners.
There aren't.
Where he's happy, and then because they're not going to trade him to Charlotte, they're not going to trade him to it, and they're not going to. Go ahead. What do you think?
No, that I don't think they would trade him someplace that he absolutely doesn't want to go. But I also don't think like a team that he wouldn't want to go to. I don't think they would be in the business of trading for him. The other part of and again, it always comes back down to the money. He's on a low, relatively for NBA standards, low number right now. He's only on his cap hit is like 28 point something million dollars. Gets a little higher with the unlikely bonus in terms of for hard cap purposes. But if you go and you try to wait, so two things, and this is the point that I keep making, and this is, I think, what maybe has been implied, but I don't know that a whole lot of people have said this. Player, if you're the Knicks and you're good, and I'm sure the Knicks hope that they're going to be whatever, first, second, third, something in the East throughout the entirety of next season, you're not shaking up the core of your team before the trade deadline. Like, you're not, if you're sitting there and you're 35-15, you're not trading Julius Randle. He's like, well, shit, we got to ride it out and see where this goes, and we'll figure out later. Well, if you're at that point, then you're waiting until next offseason. And guess what? Next offseason, either you watch him leave for nothing if he leaves as an unrestricted free agent, or you have to do a sign and trade. And then we're getting into, we're not trading him at a 28 point whatever $1 million number anymore. Now we have to trade him at a 42 or a 45 or a 48 or a 50 million, like some crazy number. And that may prove difficult. Especially since the Knicks don't all of a sudden have a whole lot of assets to attach to him. So if you're thinking, oh, well, you know, that bigger number can match him up with some of the league's best players, well, the other team has to want to do that trade. So it brings it back to what another reason why I'm sure they are exploring their options now.
If you had to put odds on him taking the extension, what would you put it percentage wise? I mean, say it's. Can you guess? You
could tell me. I could say 70-30, and you're like, well, which way is it? 70-30 he takes it, and I'd be like, I don't know. Like,
where's the problem?
I just have no. Like, if you're him, ultimately, it's a question of, well, how much does the money matter to you? And I don't know the answer to that question. Is it a respect thing? Is it like, I've made 2 of the last 4 All-NBA teams, and like you know what I thought about and I wrote about this today. I don't want to spend too long on this, but like, he just watched Paul George get 4 years and 200 and whatever million, like a max offer starting at about $50 million, right? With max raises the whole thing. I think Paul George he got everything he wanted. At the end of Randle's next contract, he will be the age that Paul George is right now. So even if Randle has a quiet moment of honesty with himself and was like, well, I'm not quite the player Paul George is, Paul George is so much older than him that he could be like, well, wait a minute, hold on. He just got that. And I'm going to sit here and I'm supposed to think that there's not a team out there that might think that I'm worth, maybe they won't give me the full boat for 4 years, which by next season will be like 4 for 2. I forget the exact math, 4 for 230, let's say. Maybe he doesn't get that or 235, whatever it is. But it's going to be a hell of a lot more than 4 for 181, which is what I can get now. I think I'm going to wait. And
yeah,
like, is that, should any of us sit here right now and be like, well, that would be crazy of him to do that? Why? This team's should be one of the best teams in the league this year. And he's going to get a lot of reps. So I just don't have a feel at all. I really don't have a feel for it.
It's tough. I two things just to add to it is I don't, at least at this moment, like I don't see another team even going the 180 for him next year, or like
You might be right.
4 for 2, whatever the max you would get. Like I just don't. He's as much as I've grown to appreciate him, he is a very unique player and a tough fit. Not just the way he plays, but I think the personality stuff, where I think the Knicks would have grown to be really comfortable with him as a personality. I think that could be something that you'd have to be confident in if you're another team putting that sort of offer on the table. Then the second thing is, like, does the injury give him a little bit of pause in terms of like waiting on an extension or waiting to next year and just saying, listen, I just had a season ending injury. I'm not superhuman anymore. Like, is it worth it for me just to get the security? So maybe that plays into it, but I can also, as you're suggesting, like he can compare himself to guys that are getting more than 40 for 180 and feel very confident that he is on that level, if not, exceeded that level. So
just it takes is one asshole.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
Well, Daryl Morey won't have the money, so we can take
Daryl Morey will not have the money, but there are some other notable teams that will have the money. He's from, I mean, I mentioned Houston today as as a possible trade partner. Houston has virtually no money committed to their books next year. There are teams that, again, if they wanted to make the play, they could make the play. It's just, we don't know. So anyway, thanks, Hush. Yashvin? I'm going to go Yashvin. Dibaru. Any world in which we sign Precious to a slight overpay and package him with seconds or Sims to get Bobby Portis. It would have to be way more than a slight overpay. I'll look it up now. I think Bobby makes like around 15 million. Bobby, oh no, that's wrong. I'm sorry. Bobby's at 12.5. You run into a different issue there. You run into an issue with base year compensation, which I'm not going to put everybody to sleep. It's almost 10 o'clock. But basically, there's no easy way to do a Precious sign and trade for Bobby Portis. And also, why would Milwaukee do that? I don't think they would.
Right. That's where I was going to get to it.
Yeah.
They like how Portis can stretch and do some of the Lopez stuff, and Precious, not that type of player. So
yeah,
nor is Jericho.
Thanks, Yashvin. Manny Campos with another one. Should I read into the Kolek contract and Rokas playing summer league in regards to a Deuce trade? No. Roster crunch is already going to reduce his minutes. So Rokas, I think, and again, I'm curious how much I'm curious if he gets interviewed on the record. I'm curious how much we'll talk about this. It seems like the writing is kind of on the wall with his team that I forget what, I think he's on Barcelona in Europe. I know he's like playing behind like Ricky Rubio and like Thomas Satoransky. He didn't get a whole lot of minutes this year. He has a weird contract that I think his contract might be up. Rokas is in a place where like he needs to figure out what the hell he's going to do with his basketball career. And I think it just only makes sense for him to come and play in summer league and like see what transpires from that. As for Kolek, do I think there's a little bit of like, yes, he got the as Ian Bagley reported, the richest contract in the most guaranteed money in the history of second rounders. That's only because these contracts go up incrementally every year, and there's a max that you could give. The only way for you to get to a 4-year deal using the second round pick exception is to go with a little bit more money. We're talking about a difference of like, a couple, like $100,000 or something like that. We're not talking about big time money here. So I would not read either of those two things as like, oh, Deuce is gone. That said, you could argue that he is their most easily movable / most desirable trade asset as a player. They have a distant pick swap they could trade. So like, I think to me, it's like the other way around. It's like they maybe are preparing for a world in which they will need to be without Deuce, not because they don't love Deuce, but they will need to be because there's not a whole lot of ways they can make trades now.
Right.
And so you want to insulate yourself from that. But I don't think they want to send Deuce out right now, like this year.
Yeah, I don't either. And then Rokas does play for Barcelona and is about to turn 24. So you're talking about like he has to decide what his basketball life is going to be. Like he's getting to an age where, I'm sure he needs to figure that out. I am, with Summer League starting on Saturday, very curious to see both of these players.
Yeah.
The little I've seen of Kolek and I've seen a decent amount of Rokas, they are, in terms of, Knicks assets, in terms of just like pick and roll playmaking and like high level passing and like manipulating the defense.
Yeah.
Like those guys, those guys might have more ability right now than Brunson in terms of like that stuff. Like they're not nearly the scorer. They don't have the shooting ability, but just like high level pick and roll stuff, like seeing, like manipulating the low man, like getting the ball to the short roll, lob passes. Like they can really do some things on that end that is very enticing. So I want to see those two. And I, like you, I don't think they want to move Deuce, but if they
love Deuce. Tibbs loves Deuce.
And he struggled a little bit in the Indiana series, but he had some really great moments in the playoffs, and his shooting is completely legit. I think his on ball stuff has gotten a little bit better. So we'll see. Maybe there's more to grow there, but I am curious about Kolek and Rokas. No idea about their long term prospects. Hopefully, I'll be able to glean a little bit more in this summer league coming up.
Yep.
Thank you, Manny.
Thanks, Manny. D. Puesh, rumors of the Thanasis trade and Knicks' interest in Cat are baseless. Gives KP vibes. Next move, Giannis.
So Thanasis, he did request a trade recently.
I saw that. I wouldn't know.
I saw that somewhere.
That's fantastic. I would love Giannis Antetokounmpo is a 2-time MVP. He's an awesome player. I respectfully disagree with Jeremy. Jeremy brought up Giannis's name as a possibility in like a year from now. I just can't fathom a world where Milwaukee would feel so boxed into a corner that if they had to trade Giannis, he could walk out of his house with a billboard in front of it saying, "Trade me to the Knicks or I will retire." And I don't think the Bucks would trade him to New York for what the assets that the Knicks have left are. Like, if you're trading, like, you're already the franchise that traded Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now you're going to trade Giannis Antetokounmpo. You got to get back, man, whoever's offering the most stuff. And I have to think someone out there would be offering a hell of a lot more than what New York would offer.
Yeah, I mean, you got to beat the Durant. You got to lease the Durant.
It's
trade,
not
right?
like it's not even worth discussing what it would take. Like I think there are star trades that could materialize in the coming years. Like, let's say they don't do anything and they go into the season with Julius and the whole thing. Let's even say Julius extends, whatever. Like, you could talk me into like Anthony Davis in a different kind of situation in LA with the money that he has coming to him in the coming years. Like, let's just say, for argument's sake, Anthony Davis has like not an injury riddled year, but like has, let's say LA doesn't make the playoffs or even the play in, and LeBron retires, and Anthony Davis is like, get me the hell out of here. You could talk me at that point into like, yeah, sure, Julius, 2 distant unprotected pick swaps, plus maybe one of their a young player pops and whatever else. Like, you could talk me into that. Giannis is a different animal, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Hopefully, Thanasis gets his trade.
Thank you, Deep Wesh. We'll saying it twice makes it even more nice. Okay. Hush Zoo with another one. Maybe hot take. I like Richards more than Kessler. That is the hottest take of the night. Even hotter than my Tibbs would prefer Cat over Gobert take. And
the only thing I'll say is, like, watching a little bit of Kessler, they seemed Utah, at least last season, to prefer him almost as like the 4 on defense at times, it's like they wanted to tap into his weak side rim protection or shot blocking versus him being the primary like drop defender. So that was at least an interesting way that they were utilizing him. He got a lot of blocks out of that, but he wasn't like he didn't look, and they didn't treat him like your staunch 7 foot plus rim protector. Well, but even with that,
a lot of funky stuff in Utah last year.
Yeah, different level than Nick Richards.
Yeah. Now, if you're saying you prefer
because of the
Richards
cost.
given the cost, that's a very different conversation. I might agree with you. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Hush. And now we're finishing up, I believe, with 2 from Kevin Danishevsky. Precious at the 4 with Cat would work with OG out. And maybe we'll get Cat's other one up here, or Kevin's other one up here as well. Thought experiment. Giannis for Julius and Mikal. I'm a no. My God, you spent the last how many years trying to get Mikal Bridges in a Knicks uniform,
and you
were
right.
To ship him out?
And you were right.
Played a goddamn game yet. Oh God, TJ, what Precious at the 4 with Cat at the 5? What are we doing here? I don't even know.
Well, I mean, look, you probably have, if you're gonna figure out a way, devise a way to get away with Precious at the 4. Him
having a shooting 5 would help.
Yeah, it's probably not. Yeah, it's probably like the one roster or lineup construction where you could live with it, and maybe he can help out Cat a little bit on defense. Yeah, it's actually, I don't think it's a terrible idea.
It's not nuts.
No, it's not nuts. No.
And on the scale of Kevin Danishevsky, it is really not nuts compared to some of the stuff that we have heard. But we love you, Kev.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you very much. All right. I think, is that it? All right. That's it. All right. Well, listen, this was great. We got into a lot of different stuff. Far more Karl Anthony Towns talk than I ever thought that I would have in
CP. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for that, CP. DJ, thank you for doing this. This was great. Anything from you before we get out of here?
No, I'm just looking forward to some clarity about this roster. What's it going to look like? Can't wait. Summer League on Saturday. Let's get some new tape, exciting stuff, even if it's a little anxiety ridden. But yeah, this was fun. Glad to do it with you. The pleasure's all mine. It's not going to hit like that Trevor Keels tape did once upon a time, but it was not a great moment for yours truly.
It's not a great moment for anybody.
No.
But it'll be great nonetheless. Thank you everybody for watching, and again, for anybody who's going to be in Vegas, we're doing the event at 8:30 at Tilted Kilt, I believe is where we're doing that. That's on the 14th. So, and just anybody who's going to Summer League, like, look for us. I'll be there. I think definitely for the Knicks first game, and I'll probably be there one of the other, either the 12th or the 14th as well. We'll play it by ear. But if you dig the video, like it, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on the podcast, you know what to do there. And as usual, we'll be back with more fun and games before you know it. Peace out.